everybody, this will be our third and last video that overviews Puritan culture, and we are going to start off by talking about religious dissenters in Massachusetts Bay Colony. And so religious dissenters, the Puritans were intolerant of religious dissenters, which is pretty ironic. I encourage you to take a minute and think about why that would be ironic, considering why Puritans came to the New World to begin with. But yes, Puritans were very intolerant of religious dissension. And so an example of this, there were many Puritan sects, including Quakers, Antinomians, Baptists, and these people were banished and had to create their communities elsewhere so that they could practice religion as they saw fit. So an example of one of these people is Roger Williams. And so Roger Williams agreed with the concept of separation of church and state, which is not how Puritan government operated. Roger Williams believed that states could not punish individuals for their beliefs, and he did not think the state could compel true orthodoxy. And because of this, he was banished, but it worked out for him in the end, as he was able to found Rhode Island and Rhode Island had no legally established church, so people had true religious freedom there. Another individual who's important to know is Anne Hutchinson, and she'll be named on the very first page of the Scarlet Letter, so keep her in mind. Anne Hutchinson was considered a heretic. She diminished the roles of ministers by claiming she could speak directly to God. And in this time period, women were seen as inferior, so this was very threatening to the men who were in power through the church. And ultimately what she did was she preached to her own followers in her home, and because of this, she was banished, and ultimately her and her family, who had been banished, died in a massacre at the hands of a group of Native Americans. So, in addition to the poor treatment of religious dissenters, also in addition to the poor treatment of people indigenous to Native America, the Puritans have one other kind of blemish on their record, which is the witch trials, which are the witch trials. So, the Puritans believed in supernatural forces. They believed that there was a constant battle occurring between God and the devil that could not be seen by humans, and this was called the invisible world. So if you read up here, this is a writing called The Wonders of the Invisible World, and it was written by Cotton Mather. And this concept of the invisible world was used to explain how people became, for instance, possessed by the devil, and why people couldn't see the possession occur. It's because it was happening in the invisible world. They also used the concept of the invisible world to explain how witches allied with the devil to carry out harms, such as the sicknesses and death of children, the loss of cattle, and other catastrophes. So the causes of these events couldn't be directly seen because they were occurring in the visible world at the will of people who were malaligned with the devil. So between 1647 and 1662, 14 people were hanged for witchcraft. It wasn't until 1692, however, that the 175 people were arrested and 19 people were hung for the Salem witch trials. Now, in these trials, both preceding and the Salem witch trials themselves, women were seen as more susceptible to the devil because of their quote-unquote weaker constitutions. And so women were primarily the accused in these witch hunts. Now, with the Salem witch trial, as I said, 19 people were hung, and eventually the execution stopped, and it was because of popular demand. It was not because ultimately any of these people were found innocent by trial. It's not because those who were trying them, the judges, realized that they were wrong. Ultimately, it was because of popular demand that the hanging stopped. So by the end of 1692, the trial started slowing down. The educated elites in Salem started putting an end to the witchcraft hysteria. Soon many started to realize that those they had put to death could have been innocent, and that it was them that were tricked by the devil into thinking that the accused was really a witch. So works were published on the subject and sent to Governor Phipps, who, in May of 1693, ended all acquittals and released all of the remaining accused witches. So these witch trials ended because of public demand for them to end. So one of these writings that essentially pushed for the end of the witch trials was recorded. So John Hale wanted the witch hunts to end, and he wanted the trials to end, and he didn't want anyone to get executed. And he wrote about his reasoning in a modest inquiry into the nature of witchcraft. And in this writing, he provides a balanced account of the Salem witchcraft trials, including the events leading up to them. And it was first printed in 1702, though here, as you can see, it has the date 1692. So it was written earlier than that. But it was first printed in 1702, and the book was written by this guy, Reverend John Hale, the pastor of the church in Beverly, Massachusetts. And he concludes with the theory that it was not Satan, not the witches, that it was Satan and not the witches who used manipulation of objects to affect others. So essentially, they believed that the devil was there and he was causing horrible things to happen in Salem, but that the women who were executed for it had nothing to do with it. All right, so ultimately, witch trials stopped, witch hunts ended, and women were no longer hung for the crimes of witchcraft because of essentially a change in point of view. So European Enlightenment helped promote a more rational view of the world. And so Puritanism essentially declined in the 18th century, but some of the secular aspects remained. So by the age of Enlightenment, self-reliance and political localism were ingrained in American culture, and ultimately that concept of self-reliance, of hard work, of political localism, those were aspects of Puritan culture that remained even though the Puritan religion itself faded. All right, so the last thing we're going to talk about are Puritan myths, specifically with the books that we're going to read. So we're going to read the Scarlet Letter, and in the Scarlet Letter, it depicts the Puritan people as wearing lots of black and having buckles on their shoes and being dour and puritanical and concerned about morals and conformity and thinking of nothing else. But we have to remember that the Scarlet Letter is going to be a fictional account, and it was actually written centuries later in 1850 by Nathaniel Hawthorne, who actually he disliked the Puritans a great deal. So this is Nathaniel Hawthorne, and the original cover page of the Scarlet Letter, published in 1850, over almost 2 centuries after Puritans actually came to the New World. And the reason why Nathaniel Hawthorne writes so critically of them is because of this guy, his great-great-grandfather, John Hathorne. So John Hathorne actually was one of the judges who presided over the Salem witch trials, and he was the only judge who never admitted that he had done something wrong. He stood by the executions of these women, and he stood by his decision. And Nathaniel Hawthorne, and you'll notice his name is spelled differently. It's because he changed the spelling of his name to try to further separate himself from his great-great-grandfather. Nathaniel Hawthorne was disgusted by the actions of his great-great-grandfather. He felt shame over it. He felt guilt. And therefore, he wrote this book as a means to criticize this aspect of his heritage that he was so upset by. So keep that in mind while you read the Scarlet Letter. It has aspects of Puritan culture in there, and knowing about Puritan culture helps us better understand the book, but remember that it's written through the biased perspective of Nathaniel Hawthorne. All right. Additionally, we're going to read The Crucible, which again is written through a lens that's not giving an accurate depiction of Puritan culture. Understanding Puritan culture will help us get more out of the play, but it's not an accurate depiction. So The Crucible was written by Arthur Miller, and it was written in 1952, and ultimately the purpose of it was an allegory for the McCarthy era and the McCarthy trials, which we'll learn about more later. However, Arthur Miller did want to bring in genuine aspects of the Puritan culture, but he does so in order to criticize the actions of McCarthy and those who supported him. So keep that in mind as you read The Crucible. It's not supposed to be written as a perfect account of Puritan life. It has a much bigger purpose than that, and therefore there are some inaccuracies and also some biases from his point of view. Alright, we are done. Thank you for watching all 3 of these videos and taking notes on them. Once you have this information committed to memory and you understand it, you should be ready to dive into our novels and get a great deal more out of them, and also to take your assessment on it. Alright, let me know if you have any questions. I'll see you later. Bye.